And I'm going to mute everybody. Okay, we are recording. So thanks everybody for showing up. I'm excited that there's a lot of you here because I feel like this is a really important class. Lisa and I are going to be talking to you today about the New Jersey state contracts. As she has mentioned many times, we are one of the few areas that still uses a proposal to purchase when we're making an offer on behalf of our buyers. And if it hasn't become clear, that should be going away within the near future. They keep trying to yank it. We keep putting up a fight, but eventually we will no longer have that document. So we're starting now to help you become familiar with the New Jersey state contract so that you can be comfortable with filling that out in lieu of the proposal before that happens. You guys really don't want to be scrambling, once that becomes your only choice, especially in a market like this where tons of offers are flying all over the place. You want to be really well versed on how to get that done quickly and cleanly and get it off to the listing agent so that your buyer's offer looks great and will be considered along with the other ones. So we're going to go through kind of several aspects of how to get that done today. What I'm going to start out showing you is one, how do you get the contract, right? So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Let me close this up. Okay. Just like everything else as far as paperwork that you would need, your New Jersey state contract is one of the documents in zip forms. And when you are to the point with a buyer where you are making an offer on their behalf, hopefully you have already started a transaction in zip forms. You don't need the DTR room yet, but you should already have things like the CIS, the buyer agency agreement, and the anti-fraud document. Those are a lot of the buyer documents you should have pretty much upfront when you first start working with a buyer. So hopefully you've already done this, but for today's purposes, in case you haven't, right? Let's say you got those documents wet signed, but now you're at the point where you're making an offer and you don't want to have to fill the contracts out by hand. This is what you're going to do. So I'm going to kind of start from scratch. As you can see, I'm in my zip forms account. I'm on my dashboard. So in order to start a new transaction, and let me make this clear, if you already have a transaction for this buyer, you're not going to start a new transaction. You are going to find their name, just like I have this one here, go back into their same transaction to fill out the contracts. So this is only if you have not yet done any zip forms documents for this client. In that case, we're going to start a new transaction. So that's right up here under the word dashboard. You'll see a little green plus sign that says new. Going to ask you what type of transaction, and for this purpose, it's for a buyer. So we're going to do new purchase or offer. Okay, so it wants you to name this transaction. And if you are to the point where you are making an offer, you can choose to name it the property address. Personally, I always name it after the buyer, as you saw on my list, because sometimes you don't get that property and that changes. So to keep it as, concise and as understandable, I usually start out by saying a buyer, and then I'll put their name in there. Okay, your location should be automatically set to our office. Then you want to choose which category. For the most part, obviously, we are dealing with residential. So we're going to select that. And something I want to show you right from the get-go, right here, everybody can see this, underneath our address for the office is this little blue button that says MLS Connect. This will show up several different places throughout this process, but if we are, basically opening this transaction because we need to write an offer, you know what house it is. So in this case, you could do it right from the beginning. You can also do it just from the contract document itself, because if you do it from here, it will save that information to the room or transaction. And like I mentioned, what happens if down the road, now they're making an offer on a different property. So I usually skip this step here from the beginning and I do it from the contract itself, but I just want you to make you aware And I'll show you what that is and how cool it is. Okay, so we've selected residential. Status is active, obviously, if we're making an offer. Next most important thing right here is where you're going to select template. Okay, so what you are looking for from the drop-down menu is going to be towards the bottom, and you're looking for South Jersey, right? And they have all 4 here. And again, we're doing a buyer right now. So you're looking for the global packet of South Jersey buyers. So let's click on that. And now we're ready to go. So we're going to click save at the bottom. So now it's opening that new transaction we just created. Again, you'll see it right here, right? Here's a little MLS Connect button, Zip Form Record Connect, or you can connect to RPR as well. This is the details page for the transaction, very similar to how it works in DTR. You do not need to fill this out. You can, but you do not need to. So to save myself, some time, I usually skip this summary page and I come up to this gray menu bar and I go all the way over to the documents. And if you used the proper template, you will see all of the documents that you need for a standard or normal transaction already in here. The first thing we're going to talk about is this page right here called the transaction cover sheet. This is a really important one to know about and to utilize because it's going to save you a lot of time in the long run. So let's open this up. What this form does is any of the information that you fill in here will autofill to the majority of the other documents in this transaction, specifically the contract of sale. So for some of our Fox and Roach documents, it won't autofill, but for the majority of the state documents, it will autofill the information. So hopefully you'll have a lot of this. You may not have all of it, and that's okay, but you do want to take the time to fill in what you know. And obviously, if you're making an offer, you're going to know the buyer information. So you would put, buyer one name. You would put their home address. This is a fake one I use all the time. Hopefully it's a fake one. So any of their phone numbers, email address is probably the most important, so you would put in whatever that is. If you have a second buyer, like husband and wife, you would put that second person in separately, all of their same information. In the weird cases where there's a third one, they do give you that option. The next is the piece that you might not have, which is the seller information. So at this point, here's where I want to show you one of the connections we have. So if we come up here to this light gray menu, on the left, you see both MLS Connect and Record Connect. So MLS Connect you can use with any MLS ID number, and it will pull in the information from that MLS listing. Always keep in mind that that information is only as accurate as the listing agent who's entering it. And we all know a lot of times we see that for owner name on the MLS listing, they just put owner of record or client of so-and-so. They're not all putting in the owner name. So in that instance, the Record Connect button is where you can use a tax ID number from the public records, okay, to pull it in. So as you can see, any document you open, those options are there for you. Once again, I'm going to avoid doing that for this particular document because if they do not get this particular house and they make several other offers on other homes, you'll have to keep coming back to this document to change it since it autofills all of the other documents. So I am going to put all my buyer information in because that's going to stay the same. I am not going to put in the seller information on this particular document. Okay, so I'm going to skip past all of the seller. However, the listing broker and selling broker. So selling broker is you, that's going to remain the same. So you should go ahead and put in all of your own information here. So, our name, your license ID number, street address of the office, your telephone number, all of this that you need here, okay? So this would be our office or broker ID, and then this is your agent ID down here, and your phone number, etc. Okay, so that you will have. I'm going to skip the listing broker information, again, because that may change if they make multiple offers. Same with property information. I'm not going to fill this out on the transaction cover sheet, okay? So really, once you get past those first 2 pages, that at this point is all you want to fill in. So you want to make sure all your buyer's information is in there, that your brokerage information is in there, and that is going to remain the same no matter what document you're filling out or what house you're putting an offer in. So once you have made these changes, you do have to hit this little save button, and it's still that little floppy disk icon like it will always be, even though those don't exist anymore. So we're going to click save. Little window is going to pop up here telling you that it's been saved, and it will blank out so that you know that you've done it. So once you have the transaction cover sheet filled out, green back button in the upper left. This is important to understand to use this. If you use your browser back button up here, it can blow you all the way out of Zip Forms. So use the back button within Zip Forms itself, which is this green button in the upper left. Now we're back into the transaction where we can see all of our documents, okay? So if I open up one of these, let's say the CIS, which is a state form. Okay, so this is a bad example because this one didn't autofill. It should have autofilled the buyer's name right there. Like I said, it's not foolproof, but trust me when I say it does a lot of the work for you. So what we're going to go through now is look for the contract of sale form, right? Because that's at the point, we're at the point where we want to do that now. So here it is here. If for whatever reason you accidentally used the wrong template, or you're using an older template you created yourself and the state contract is not in this transaction, if you need to find it, in the upper right is the all forms, which is your library button. At the top, it gives you a list, if you click on it, of all the libraries. You would go to NJAR here, and then you would just scroll down until you find the one that says contract of sale form. It's highlighted because it's already in this one. But if it was not, you would click here and it would add that form to your transaction for you. So that's where you find it, NJAR library, if you're looking. Okay, so for the contract of sale form right here, I'm gonna go ahead and open this up so that we can start working on it. All right, so now I am at the point that I'm writing an offer. I know what specific property I am writing this offer for. So you can use the MLS Connect or the Record Connect on this particular document. So if we open this up, first you have to do MLS Connect, I guess, here. So we're going to start with MLS Connect, okay? It should be auto set to you're looking in bright, and you have to have, it says right here, the MLS ID number. So let me just go, I thought I had it open, I don't. So let me real quick go to bright. We're just gonna go in one of my searches and grab a random property. Let's do 505 Fern. Okay, so I opened up the MLS. Right here is the MLS ID number. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to come back to Zip Forms. I'm going to paste it right there. See how sometimes you get that gap there? That happens frequently. Go ahead and delete that out so that it will read. And then you can even check off this box to include the property photo so it will show up on this transaction. It visually makes it easier for you to follow with what property you're working with. So once you have the MLS ID number in here, you're going to click this green Find button. Now it's giving you the information here to make sure it's got the right property. So 505 Fern was the one that we wanted. So once it's found the right property, you're going to hit the green Import button. Okay, we're going to say yes to replace data. It's going to tell you, did it successfully? And it says some forms may not filled out due to their special code. So all that means is you want to make sure you're double checking and making sure all these boxes are filled, which I'll get to. So we're going to click OK. And if we scan down the document, we'll see it has filled in the address for us right here of the property that they're purchasing. It didn't have the county, the municipal or township filled out, so you can go ahead and put that in. In this case, it's still Magnolia, it's a borough, it's its own borough. And it does have the block and lot number and everything else. Okay, so that's been auto-filled for you. But what you will see is that the seller's name, according to the MLS, is of record on Warwick Road. So obviously that's not who we want to put in here. So now the really cool thing is we can come up to Record Connect. And without you doing anything, this button is going to go into the public records, and it's going to find that person's name and the address they're attached to. So this is now coming from the public records. And it says, please choose a name in the form of first, middle, last. And it has all the different iterations here. So here's first, middle, last. So I'm going to click on that one. And it's now going to change our seller one on the contract to that name. We're going to hit yes, we want to make that change. Now you're good. Now your seller is John A. Bayers. Okay. So a lot of, agents kind of argue a little bit, or not argue, but fuss a little bit about, well, if I'm writing contracts, I don't have any of the information about the property. The reality is you do. With those two buttons, you can fill in, the other agent's information, the MLS information, the tax ID information, and you can even pull the seller's name as long as it's in the public record. If it isn't in there, well, then you do have to reach out to that other agent and ask, or you would put seller of record on that line, and that can be changed later. So don't get too hung up on what information you don't have about the seller, because that can be filled in later. The reality is you have all the information about your buyer and what type of offer they want to make. So that's what you're going to concentrate on getting into here. Okay. All right. So the other button that I want to show you guys on this document is, again, up here in this same menu, which is this fast fill button right here. And this is a game changer. What this will do is eliminate all of the wording on all of these pages and just pull up the spots that you need to fill in. Now, this works best if you're already somewhat familiar with what this contract is and what type of information you need. So the first few times you do this, if you're not familiar with the state contract, you probably do want to do it the long way, just by reading through and checking off every box. But if you are passingly familiar with the contract, go ahead and save yourself some time and use this fast fill button. So I'm going to click here. And this is what it looks like. So it tells you what the title is of the information you have to put in, and you can just go through and fill this in without having to read through an entire contract. So that's the beauty of this fast fill button. Okay, so if there's a second seller, if there's a second buyer, your buyer one's already in there, which is why it's not showing up. There's a third buyer, the listing broker, and the selling broker, and obviously your name goes under prepared by since you're the one writing the contract. Okay, this is the buyer's current address that you would put in, the seller's current address, which you can just copy and paste from property address if it's the same one, right? Purchase price. So here's the first kind of important thing we want to make sure we're hitting. Okay, what are your buyers offering for the purchase of this home? So you want to make sure you put in whatever it is for purchase price. I'm literally picking a random number here that they want to put in. The next is the initial deposit amount. Okay, so this is going to be basically your escrow that you're offering, right? So let's say it's $2,000. Deposit amount and first increase, this is generally blank, right? We don't typically offer a second deposit on properties. We just offer the initial escrow. and then they, you know, take the rest out at closing. So then the next thing would be the total amount financed. So their mortgage amount is what's going to go into this box here. So for argument's sake, I'm going to say they're mortgaging 138,000 of that 145,000. Okay. So this is where it can get a little confusing if you're not familiar with the contract, because it literally just says the name of the line. But what this is talking about is who's going to hold that escrow deposit. So you're going to put a checkbox next to whatever entity is holding that escrow. Generally speaking, it's the listing broker. So I'm going to select that. You can say other type of initial deposit date. So this is the due date for them to get the escrow to the listing agent, okay? So usually, if you're familiar with the contract, it says if left blank, I believe it's within 5 days of whenever you date this contract, but if there's a specific day, you know, so if I'm making an offer on a Wednesday, I would say they'll get it there, you know, by the Friday or the Monday. So you would just pick whatever day. Again, we don't usually do additional deposits, so we're going to skip that. The principal amount is, again, the amount that they're mortgaging, and what type of mortgage is it. So you're going to check off whether it's VA, FHA, conventional, 203K, something else weird. If you do select other, you have to type in the description right here. How many years is it? Usually it's a 30-year type loan, which would be the same here. And the mortgage commitment date. So generally speaking, this is what, 2 weeks prior to whatever closing date you're going to select. So, you know, let's say we're trying to close by November 7th, you would make the mortgage commitment date due, let's say maybe the 31st. Okay. Next is your closing date. Again, remember, this is important. This is something you're going to ask your buyer. When do they want to close? What is their goal for closing? Obviously, we can't close on the 7th. It's Saturday, so I'm going to say Friday the 6th. Although, read Danielle's email. Don't do Fridays, guys. Okay. Closing date continued. Okay, we don't need to continue. Included items. If you click there, usually it has whatever the MLS says, but you do want to double check. And if your buyer is asking for anything additional to be included that is not detailed in the MLS, that's where you want to put it in. For excluded items, again, it usually says, you know, personal property, but if nothing specifically is stated in the MLS, you can just leave that part blank. Selling price. Lisa, I don't know if you want to jump in there. I'm not sure exactly what that is in the contract. Is it just the mortgage amount again? Are you muted? All right, well, I'm going to skip that for now because we're going to review the contracts again anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that was just the amount of the house.
Yeah, I think that's just your, you know, what you're offering again. So I'm going to go with 145,000. Okay, and again, this is like, what the heck does this mean? Has not been notified of such, has not been notified of any. What this is referring to is the paragraph that talks about municipal assessments on their taxes. So this is something that the seller themselves have to fill out. So you're going to leave that blank. So this is a single family home, right? If it was a condo, you would put that. If tenancies are applicable. So this is something you should know because it should be detailed in the MLS if there's currently a tenant in the property. So if there is, you're going to say yes, that is applicable. If there is no tenants, if it's just owner occupied, you're going to say no, that's not applicable. If there is a tenant, you're going to enter that name if you have it. If you don't get hung up on that. The seller can do it later. Just keep going. Okay. Next thing is lead-based paint applicable. You should know that purely based on the age of the home. So you're either going to check off yes or no. Days after receipt of the. So this is, we're going to start with all these blocks, is going to be referring to the different inspection terms. All of them have in the contract, if you're reading it, a statement in parentheses next to this box that states if left blank, whatever number of days will apply. Some of them are 10 days, some of them are 14 days, and it can be different. So if you have a specific timeline where you're gonna need an additional amount of time for inspections, you can choose to write something in here, but the reality is you can just leave these blank because it does have that statement in the contract that there will be a standard number of days if you leave it blank. So now it's asking you if any of these situations are applicable where you're going to need an additional inspection. So this is point of entry treatment system. So that would be, like a system if there's a well that treats the water, like salt tanks that removes iron, that kind of thing. So again, hopefully this information should be in the MLS, and you should already know that, yes, there's a point of treatment system. So I need to make that applicable or not applicable. Cesspool you should hopefully know about. So calendar days here, these are all, again, those same types of boxes where this specific one is referring to the home inspection period. All of these boxes can be left blank because the contract has that statement next to them with the standard number of days. So you can skip this whole section, again, unless you want to already upfront ask for an increased amount of time for whatever reason. Okay. So name of firm and name of licensees. This is where we're filling in, all of the information, the disclosure basically with everybody's real estate license number and all of that. So firm and licensees would generally, it's whoever's writing the transaction. In this case, it's you, but really it probably should be the listing person, but you can put, Lisa, fill me in here. Can it be either one? Does it need to be one over the other?
So we have to remember that these are going in as, instead of for the buyer, it's the proposal to purchase, but they're going in as contracts. So normally the reason that you're seeing all of that is because the listing agent would normally prepare the contracts. But if you're preparing it, you would put your name in there. And we have to remember, if it's going out as a contract, it's going to be changed because there's going to be different things.
Right.
Just like the cesspool, all of that stuff, we might not have that information right from the start because, again, it's our proposal to purchase now going in as a contract. So they will be filled in after the fact. But as Corey said in the beginning, the most important things are to get the buyer information in and all, the financing, all of those things that you need, inclusions, exclusions, what's ever in the MLS, all the other details. And even if we don't know that there's an addendum needed, it will go in there. But mostly it's for the contract. And this all looks foreign. So I think, and I saw the names like on the class right now, you're like, what is going on with all this? So it's a lot easier to look. I mean, if you're doing them all the time, then you're going to get real familiar with it, like Corey said, but it's a lot easier to go through the contract in front of you. And interestingly enough, the OAs don't even use this fast fill. Hattie is so quick with looking at the contracts, she just knows where to type in and fill it in. She doesn't even look at that.
Yeah.
I like the fast fill part of it, but she does it, they do it differently because they're so used to just looking at the contracts and filling them in.
Right, exactly. So if you're feeling like you're lost and, while you're watching this, you're like, I don't know what any of these boxes are. Well, then don't use this screen. That's fine, right? Just be on the regular contract, have it open so you can read as you go and know what information you're supposed to be putting in there. So for the purpose of this class, don't get caught up on this fast fill button. Okay, don't worry if you're not understanding what I'm showing you. You would just close this out, go back to the regular document itself and fill it in there. That's also perfectly fine, like Lisa said. If you're not overly familiar, if you're not used to doing your own contracts, I always do. So for me, it's a little bit easier to just rip through here, but every once in a while, obviously I do have to go back and remind myself, okay, what does that one box mean again? So that's fine, you don't have to use this. I just wanted to show you it is a way where it reduces the number of pages you have to scan through and fill information in, okay? So it's gonna be the name of one firm plus the licensee. Then it wants to know which agency is for that person. So really whoever you put in here is fine. Just make sure it says, like the listing agent, if you're doing that, their name and their firm, and that they're the seller's agent. And then it says name of other firm. So whatever the other side is, you would put in there. So it'd be your name and brokerage and that you're the buyer's agent. So that's what this is. And then listing broker firm name, you can see thanks to that MLS Connect, that's already in here for you, right? So if anything, you just add their cell number if you happen to have it. And then the selling broker firm name, if you had filled out that transaction cover sheet, I obviously didn't take the time to do that, but if you had, all of your information would already be here. You would not have to fill this in. Okay. Next one is if real estate license. So this is, that little paragraph that says you have to disclose if any of the parties involved are a licensed real estate agent. So whether or not that applies, who it is, if it does apply. These are all the possible concessions, amendments, etc., that you want to add to this document. So if it's contingent upon the buyer selling a property, you have to check off this box. If there is, and it says right here, now it's added that addenda, right? If it is a private well, you need to have, the seller pays for it, but that needs to be tested. So you would check that off. If there's a condo association, you would check that off. If there's 3 or more families in the property. Coronavirus, nowadays we're checking that off. It's going to add that lovely addenda for us. If there is a seller concession, which I'm guessing most likely there probably is on a lot of your transactions. So there's really, no clear spot to add this into the state contract other than just under additional contract provisions, which we're getting to. But what they've done is given you this checkbox to then add an amendment or addendum to the contract to detail that seller's concession. So if this is part of your purchase offer and your buyer is asking for some money back, make sure you check that off. So that's an important one to add. Then it's going to get into what type of mortgage, and if you have an FHA or VA loan, there is that extra addendum that needs to get added. So we would check that off, which is very common, obviously, nowadays. If it's a short sale and you know that, you would check that off. If you already checked off that it is old enough to warrant the LBP, lead-based paint, you're going to go ahead and check that off. It'll add that amendment. So this is just going to add all these amendments for you automatically by checking off the correct terms, okay? We all know there's some new ones now for solar, well, fairly new. They've been around for a minute at this point, but don't forget, if there's solar panels or a swimming pool, those are additional amendments or addendums that you need to add now. If it's new construction, private sewage disposal, which would be basically, any septic type situation. Or if you know at this point that there is an underground fuel tank that you're going to have to deal with. So this is just a list of addendums that would be added depending on specific circumstances. So you're going to check off whichever ones of these you already know will apply. And as Lisa mentioned, if anything comes up along the way, these contracts can be edited. It's not the end of the world. So just do your best to check off the ones you know are going to apply. Okay, so we're going to spend a little bit of time here. Additional contract provisions. If we were to go back to just the regular document, and let me show you how to do that since we were talking about it. Right here, see this little magic wand? When we clicked fast fill, it said fast fill, right? It was this magic wand, same icon, and it said fast fill. Well, if we're sick of fast fill and we want to go back and look at the document itself, you click that same icon again. Now it says viewer. Come on. Now I'm back in the contract. So now I'm back in contract view. Okay, so that's how you would do that. Probably should have told you that earlier, but there you go. So I'm going to go just back down to where we get to additional contract provisions. Past all this lovely stuff. That's where all of the agency goes. Here's where we were just checking off all of our different addenda. And here's additional contract provisions, right? It's basically just blank. Now, we as an office have kind of decided that there is some information that should go here for every single transaction. And essentially, it is that home inspection information that was in the old Gloucester County contract that was wonderful because it outlined the understanding, the unspoken understanding of what a defect is versus, just something that's cosmetic. So it's really good to include that information so that, your buyer understands that they can't ask for a bunch of random stuff, and the seller understands that if there are issues with certain systems, really it should be their responsibility. So in order to find that wording, Lisa and Patty have been wonderful about adding a folder to Google Drive for all of you to have access to. So when you get to additional contract provisions and you want to add that home inspection explanation basically here, I'm going to show you how to get that. So you would just open a new tab. You would go to your inbox here, and at the upper right corner of your inbox, there's this little square of squares. Those are all your Google apps related to your Fox and Roach account. So if you click here, you'll see Drive right here.
I don't know if they can see it because the tiles are on the right-hand side. Can anybody not see it?
Unmute yourselves and tell me if you can, because I moved mine so I can see it fine, but.
I can't see it.
Okay, is there something in the way?
Yeah, you.
Tiles, all the
Yes.
Okay, so I moved it on my end, but apparently it doesn't move it on your end. So, okay, what you guys can do is just.
You can hide it. They can hide it.
Thumbnail video. If you click
Yeah,
on
they can hide it.
the top of your screens, it'll do that. Or you can just take my word for it that in the upper right-hand corner of your Gmail account, there is a little square of squares next to your name. You can click there and you will see a little triangle and it says Drive, and you open that up. And when you guys watch the recording back, it won't be in the way, just FYI. It's an issue for you. Okay, so once we're in here, this is anything that you have stored in your drive, but also gives you access to anything that is a shared document or shared folder. And that's what Lisa and Patty have created. In order to find it, there's this search in Drive, and the folder is called Washington Gloucester Documents for Agents or something like that. So if you literally just type WASH for Washington, comes up right here. Wait, is that it?
No.
Yep. Nope. I literally just had it pulled up like 2 seconds ago. That's crazy.
Write out the whole word. Yeah.
It isn't the whole word though. I literally pulled it up right before class and had it open. Here it is. Like, I'm just going to go to the other screen. It's literally called WASH/GLOU Office Docs for Agents.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know why it was, why it wasn't showing up? Because I already had this open in another screen. That's why. So sorry about that. But that's what you would type in the search, literally just WASH, and it will give you a list, and you're going to look for the one that's a folder that says WASH/GLOU Office Docs for Agents. And then all of the information that the OAs have been wonderful about gathering in here, you have access to yourselves. So right here on the second line, you'll start seeing addendums for agreement of sale. Okay. These all vary slightly because as other agents use them and make edits, it just saves iterations of the same thing. So you can open one. And this stuff that's in bold is what I'm talking about. Those of you familiar with the old contract will see that this is just word for word explaining, what a home inspection should cover and what the buyer should be able to ask for and what the seller should be willing to repair. This one happens to have some other ones you can add. It just says the buyer shall supply all necessary information and fees required. We used to have to add that to the old Gloucester County contracts. There's a paragraph for that in the state contract, so I don't know if you still need that one. Lisa, you can correct me if I'm wrong here.
If it's in the contract, you don't need it, but the home protection plan, we always like that to go in there. Yeah.
Okay. So again, if it's in bold, you would add this in, but read it because this one says buyers and sellers mutually agree that the seller will provide, right? So what that means is if you're doing this as an offer on behalf of your buyer and your buyer wants the seller to pay for a home protection plan, this is what you would, or home warranty is what we call it, right? Home warranty. So you would copy and paste this, meaning you are asking the seller to pay for that home warranty. If your buyer does not want to ask for that as part of their offer, then you would need to change this wording a little bit.
Or just take it out.
Or just take it out, right? You would just say that, you know, seller will not be providing, or if the buyer's going to provide it for themselves. Or as I think we've talked about, what if your buyer is offering to pay for the home warranty and offering the seller coverage as part of your offer to sweeten the deal? Then you can tweak this wording slightly and still put it in there because that is part of your offer if the buyer is offering to do that. So just keep the mindset as we're going through these contracts. All the basic parameters are going to be in there, but anything unique about the offer that your buyer wants you to present is going to have to go in under this additional contract provisions or as part of an amendment. Either way, you need to make sure whatever your buyer wants you to ask for that's unique to this offer, you have to get in here. So if I wanted to add this to the additional contract provisions, I would just, you know, highlight, copy, come back over to my zip forms, click in here, paste. So the only thing I'll say about this is something that I personally have run into. If we are doing contracts as our offer and there are a lot of other terms that your buyer is asking for, or conversely offering to try to sweeten the deal, putting this here under additional contract provisions takes up a lot of room, and you can only put so much words in here, so many words in here. It will cut off after a certain point. So if you have a lot of other information you need to get in here on behalf of your buyer, like about a home warranty or the seller's concession or, you know, some weird circumstance that they're offering, you can choose to put this in as an addendum and save this space for the stuff you really want the listing agent to pay attention to. Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I've done it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. But let's say it's a pretty basic offer. I'm just gonna, you know, put that here. I would add the home amendment stuff. Home warranty stuff. If they're asking for that or offering that as part of their offer, that would go here as well. Okay. Witness is generally your name next to the buyer, and listing agent generally next to the seller. This autofills for you. We're done. Okay. So that took a little longer since I was explaining what everything was to you. But once you are familiar with this contract and you start doing this more frequently, whether on the sell side or buy side, the contract is the same either way. So if you're doing contracts on behalf of your seller rather than asking the OAs to do them, that'll kind of help you practice now to get ready to do it on behalf of your buyers as well. So you can come in here, just familiarize yourself with the contracts so that you do know what information needs to go where. If you are super familiar with it at this point, you can use that fast fill button to try and help you out to move a little bit faster. If you're not familiar with it, then you want to make sure that you're reading through it this way and filling in all of these boxes here. Okay.
Can I just add one thing? Can I add one thing to that?
Of course.
So we also have to remember when writing the contracts, whether it's for our sellers or for our buyers, we are not attorneys. So the contract was written and prepared by attorneys for us, you know, for the state to use these contracts. What that means is we don't cross off, we can't edit what's already said in the contract. It has to read as stated. So sometimes, you know, I've seen contracts come through with exits, you know, cross-outs, things, we can't remove that. Those things we cannot do. So if you wanted to add something, like Corey said, it's in an addendum or something like that. And we're not attorneys, we can't do legal things. So we just have to be mindful of that fact, not to change the written word, what's on that contract, even though there may be something in zip forms which has strikeout, or we're not to do that. So just to remember.
Exactly. And if there are any other special circumstances that you need to add, chances are Patty has already put in a written version for you in this Google folder. Okay, so as you can see, there's an as-is clause you can add. Like if you're sending a contract to an REO property, you know, that's going to need to be in there. If it's something weird that you need to do, which usually at the offer point you don't, but if there is, always obviously check with Lisa or Patty to see if we already have wording written for it so that you can just copy and paste that in. Okay, so let me go
And
back.
the wording that's there, all those addendums, they're already approved. So I just didn't wake up in the middle of the night and say, I'm going to write this and we're going to add it into our contracts. So we've already gotten it approved, you know, through legal to make sure we can put those things in there. So
Right,
it's
which
not
is why you
something
always
that-
want to ask. You don't just want to make up some wording, right?
Right.
Always ask first if there's something else that you need to add into this contract.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to pause at this point. I'm going to open this back up. I can figure, I can't make it big while I'm sharing screen, so I'm going to stop sharing screen for just a minute and just unmute all of you. So if anybody has questions up and until this point, you can go ahead and ask them now. Some of you are still muted because you muted yourself, but unmute yourself if you have a question up to this point. Anybody? Oh, why is my video off? Hold on, sorry. There I am. Okay. Anybody have a question? Going
No?
once, going twice?
No,
All right.
I have one question. It's
Yes,
Barbara.
ma'am.
Barbara.
Where did you go? I had to answer the phone. It was my client. Where did you go when you got the Wash Gloucester office docs? Where did you go to get that? I missed where you went.
Sure. So I went into my Fox and Roach Gmail account.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Once you're in your
And then
Gmail account, in the upper right-hand corner,
Right.
there's an icon that looks like a checkerboard almost.
Yeah.
If
I'm
you
familiar
click
with
that and then go into the drive, you can search for
Okay.
that folder.
it. Okay.
You
Gotcha.
can also set up like a quick link to you can drag and drop that folder onto your desktop if that makes it easier for you to get to. Every agent has access to that folder. So, you can set up a shortcut or whatever you want to do to make it easier for you to find it.
Okay. Good. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to go back to screen share. And at this point, we've got our contracts filled in. So what do we do now, right? So let me start share again. Let me close this up again so I can see. Okay. So first thing you're going to do, don't forget to save. You just did all that work. And if you back out of this document, hopefully it'll give you a warning like you haven't saved yet. But make sure you hit the little floppy disk save to save all of that information.
So there should be a setting, and everybody should check their settings on your zip forms because there is a button for autosave. So if it's not checked, make sure it's checked, because if you don't manually save it, you're going to lose it, like Corey said.
Right.
So if you set up your profile, and that's the first thing you're gonna want to do if you're new to zip forms, or if you just haven't done it, make sure that you check on the auto save, and it automatically will do it for you.
Perfect. Good tip, Lisa. Thank you. All right. So once we've saved this, we want to get back to our list of documents. Again, green back button within zip forms. Here I am. So now if we scroll down, we'll see all of those addendums or amendments that we checked off in the contract have been added to your transaction, okay? So here's the sale contingency addendum if your buyer has to sell their own property. So you would open this up. Okay, you have to fill in the buyer's property address unless it's in your transaction cover sheet, and then it should autofill. I just didn't fill that in. And then the date that you're selecting for which it would need to be sold by. Okay, so you would fill that out You would go back and hit save. We would go back. There's the coronavirus addendum that we checked off, right? Which everybody should have now as part of their contracts. There's the seller concession, very important one. I tend to double up and I will write the seller's concession on the contract itself under additional contract provisions, but I will also make sure that this addendum is attached. And all you do is put the seller concession amount here in this box, and then everyone signs it, and that's why there's no confusion. Nobody can say, oh, I didn't see that or whatever, okay? So fill that one out if there's a seller's concession. The FHA, VHA, or VA, sorry. If it's a FHA or VA loan, you're gonna have that addenda and the lead-based paint addenda. So you would fill all of these out in addition to the contract if any of these addenda apply to the contract. Once you have done that, now you are ready to send it to your buyer for a signature. Don't forget that step. Even when you're using the proposal to purchase, they should be signing that. And I know a lot of agents just kind of write their name in on behalf of, but really, you know, if we're doing our job correctly, the buyer should be signing this, especially if you want it to be taken seriously as an offer. You want there to be no question that this is what the buyer themselves are offering to the seller. So the easiest way to do that, one, you can print this out and have them wet sign. But the easiest way to do that is to get it via e-sign, which you can do right from here, okay? So upper left-hand corner, when we're on our Documents tab, the upper left-hand corner, all the way over to the left here, says e-sign. We're going to click that button. A lot of people get here and they get stuck. They're like, well, there's nothing here. What do I do? You have to actually start a new envelope to go through DocuSign. So you're going to click the little plus sign, new button. Now it's going to pull up all of the documents in this transaction and ask you which ones you want to have signed. So if you haven't yet had the CIS and all that, you can include that as well. Hopefully you already have it, so that all you need to do is the contract and any addendums that go along with that contract. So contract of sale form, that's what we just filled out. We're going to check that off. And then we're going to scroll down to see if there's any of the addendums that we need to include. So property sale contingency, if your buyer has to sell first, you would include this. Coronavirus, if there's a seller concession, that needs to be included. If it's an FHA or VA loan, we're going to include that one. And if it's lead-based paint, we're going to include that one. So you're going to check off the contract and any additional addendum that need to go along with it. Once you have made your selections, you click the blue close button at the bottom. And you can see now it's saved all of these documents. If you forgot one, click right here, select documents to include, and you can add additional. Once you have all of the documents included, and you can rearrange the order if you need to, if you drop them in a funny order and the contract isn't first, you can just drag and drop these into the order you want them to show up in the envelope for signatures. So once you have this set, I don't know if you guys can see it if the thing's in the way, but in the upper right, there's a green next button. You're going to click next. Now it's asking you which parties do you want to have sign this. And at this point, it's going to be your buyer, however many. You have to have an email. So as you can see, I just tried to check off my buyer one person and I don't have an email for them. So you would just at this point go ahead, you know, and fill that in. And then the other person is going to be you as the selling agent. There's going to be, you know, plenty of places where you need to witness or what have you. So you want to go ahead and put both your buyer and yourself in here. Okay. There was a second buyer, obviously you would include them as well. But as long as you have just the buyers and yourself, you're good to go. You're going to hit close again once you're done. And what I want you to pay attention to is right here for signing order. If this box is checked off, these documents are only going to go to one person at a time. So it's going to go to my buyer first. They will have to sign, and then it will come to me to complete the signatures. If you uncheck this box, it will go to everyone at the same time, which is also fine, and you will just get notified once everyone has completed signatures. If you forgot someone and need to add them, there's an add signers button right here. Okay, so once this is all set, in the upper right-hand corner, again, is a green next button. Click that. And what's going to happen now is it's actually going to put you into DocuSign itself. Continue.
And for this part right here, where it's going right from Zip Forms to DocuSign, again, check your settings and your profile in Zip Forms. Make sure it's going to ask you, when you look under your profile and settings, it's going to ask you, make sure your Zip Forms and your DocuSign are connected. It's a button that you have to hit, and you'll have to put your DocuSign, the address and your password in, and then it will connect you automatically every time.
Correct.
So if you're doing this and you're finding that it's not going,
yeah,
that's because you're not connected.
Correct, and that's under integrations in your profile. Okay, so as you can see, kind of the beauty of doing it this way is a lot of these are going to already be tagged for you. So whichever people you put in here, it is going to automatically put in a lot of these tags for you. However, it is not foolproof. So I always want you at this stage to scan through this document and make sure that all of the appropriate tags are here. Okay? All right, so the initial at the bottom of every page. There you go. They're picking that up, which is great. Pretty sure the contracts are one that is really good. Some of the other documents aren't as great. You have to double check them.
Right. And what's interesting is every person is color coded.
Correct.
If you're not familiar with DocuSign. So right now it's the buyer in yellow, and that buyer's name is class contract. It says so on the left-hand side. Everybody
right here.
can see that.
Right.
So that's the buyer. And there's only two people that Corey added, was the agent, Corey, and then that buyer. So that when it's anything you see tagged yellow is for the buyer to sign, and the buyer will see that. And then when the next person goes to sign, it's a different color.
Correct. So as I get towards the bottom, I should show up in blue somewhere. So here's one where you would, again, does an autofill, because the contract doesn't know exactly who the witness is going to be. However,
and it's okay if it's DocuSigned, you don't have to have that witness signature as you would do if you were having a wet sign.
Good point, because it has that summary record.
Yeah, because you have the record. So if you're sitting with that person, with the contracts, going over them and signing them, you're absolutely going to witness next to where they sign. If
Right.
it's by DocuSign, we don't normally have to be that witness because it's done electronically. And having said that, even though you're sending it for e-signature, the contract, that doesn't, alleviate your responsibility for going over that contract with that buyer, or, when you have that buyer needs to know basically what they're signing. And again, it's not that we're misrepresenting ourselves as an attorney going over the contracts, but just basically explaining what each kind of paragraph is, and you can kind of summarize it. There's a lot of agents, really good buyer agents, that turn over a sample copy of that contract when they first meet their buyers to say, look, these are the things, that we're going to be doing. Here's what the contract's going to look like. So when you see it, you're not going to be surprised. Here's what I'll go over. So that's something that you can do when you have a buyer's appointment right from the start. And it actually, you know, kind of determines your value and your worth with that client right from the beginning. You're setting the tone. Here's the contract. Let's not make sure there's no surprises for you on it, especially too when they're signing it as an offer now. That this is going to be, they need to know beforehand what it looks like. So
Yep, that is something I always do, especially with first-time home buyers that have never seen a document like this before. So on that note, what I would do is if you're in your Zip Forms transaction, so let me go back into, I'm in the envelope, let me go back out to my transactions. Here's the one we were just doing. So from the very beginning, like Lisa said, when you first get a new buyer and there's all these different forms that hopefully you as the agent are explaining to them, you can include the contract at that point and answer any questions that they have. So by the time they're ready to make an offer, one, they already kind of understand what parameters they're going to need to address, right? Because it's not just about price. There's a whole other load of stuff in there that's included in an offer. So hopefully they already kind of have an understanding of what is involved in the contract, and they've been thinking about how they want to structure their offer. Plus, they're not reading it for the very first time when you're asking them to sign it as an offer, which they will then be held to. So if you're in Zip Forms, you can pull up a blank one from the library or, what have you, but you can go into here and you can find the contract of sale form in a transaction. Once the form loads, which I don't know why my internet's so slow. Okay. So right here at the top, there's the print button. And what you want to do is the last selection, which says print sample. What you don't want to do is just hand out a blank contract that anyone can then fill in. You don't want to do that. So if you hit print sample, it will come up like this with the word, sample watermarked on it. So they can still read through it and you can explain it to them, but they can't just go fill it out or leave it laying around and then somebody else has a copy of it, right? And you want to make sure, obviously, their information isn't on here or any other personal information. So you want to pull up a blank copy from the library and print sample.
Right, and that's good for both sides, for buyer and seller. Even if the seller says, can I see a copy of the contract? We never send a blank. It's always says sample on it because our information is actually on the bottom of the contract. So we never want to give out anything that's blank. That's just, a good way to do business. And that's what we do here.
Okay, so I'm going to go back over to where I was. All right, so we're in DocuSign. Hopefully this isn't the first time they're seeing this document, as Lisa just pointed out. And for me personally, Lisa brought up a good point where if you are sending this via DocuSign, DocuSign itself is the witness because it will timestamp that signature for you. But I, out of habit, always still just add myself and sign it. I don't know why it's double, but I always do. So in that case, if you need to add an additional field because something has been missed, it didn't auto tag something correctly, you want to make sure up here on this drop down, you're on the correct person. And as Lisa mentioned, there's 2 different colors. So in this case, I'm adding a field for myself as the agent. So I'm going to click on my name. Then it's going to turn blue, so it's you, and I'm going to drag my signature right here so that I do sign this as a witness. So we'll just use this as an example. As Lisa said, you don't have to do that if you're sending it via DocuSign, but I do anyway. I'm going to continue to check. All right, this is all good here. Here's all of our addendums. All right, so this one, not the end of the world if you leave it like this, but as you can see, it's kind of supposed to be here. So I can just drag it and move it as I need to. All right, this is kind of out of whack. So again, I can just kind of move it slightly if I want it to be nice and clean, and I can add myself as a witness again. All right, again, a little off, so I'm just going to move it a little bit, add myself. Again, this is just how I do it, so you don't have to. fix this up a little bit so it's nice and clear. Something else I should point out, guys, see how this is highlighted in blue? That means you can actually change the size. So depending on your settings, sometimes these will come in and you'll see like they're teeny tiny. Don't leave it like that, because then when you get the signed copy back, like nobody can read what that is. So make sure, as long as there's enough space, you know, you have a decently sized signature so that you can read that person's name when they fill this in.
That's a good point, because I've seen them that you need like a magnifying glass.
Yeah, I get that from agents all the time, and I'm like, well, what does this even say? You know, so make sure that that's a decent size depending on where they're signing. Okay, right, so we're looking pretty good. This seems to do a really good job of auto tagging on the contract and all the addendums, so that's great, saves you a lot of work. Okay, so once we have all of our signature tabs or date sign tabs or anything else you need to add in here, there's other things over here, but that's a whole separate DocuSign class. Once we have this all set and we've double checked it, upper right hand corner, again, I'm sorry if it's hidden, but just take my word for it. In the upper right hand corner, there is a yellow send button. It's also down here, if you can see this, on the bottom right. So either way, we're gonna go ahead and hit send. And there you go. This document has now been sent off to your buyer so that they can review and sign it. Once all parties have completed their signatures, so if there's multiple buyers, keep in mind they both have to do this separately. You'll need separate emails for them. But once all parties have signed, you will get several emails to your Gmail account, one from DocuSign when it's been completed, and one from ZipForms to let you know when it has shown back up in your ZipForms transaction. Because if you sent it from ZipForms, it's going to come back to ZipForms with the signed copy and save it into your transaction in a folder with those signed versions in it. And then from there, you can actually just open up the signed copy and then use the email or send, it's called right here, send tab to send it to the listing agent. Or you can download that PDF of the signed copy, send a regular email, and have it as an attachment. So whatever your preference is. If you have a bunch of stuff you need to send, not just this, like you probably have to send the pre-approval, right? The mortgage pre-approval as well. And in this case, if you sent it straight from ZipForms, you would be sending that as a separate email. So generally speaking, I probably would download the PDF of the signed copy of everything and then send it in a separate email along with the pre-approval or proof of funds or whatever it is that you have.
Yeah, you can do it both ways if you wanted to do it, because if it'll come back when it's signed, it'll come back red on the bottom. So the color will turn from blue to red. If you want it, because normally you're going to attach, like Corey said, the pre-approval, you can upload it to here.
You can add the document, yeah.
You can add the document into here, so it would be your pre-approval. Yep, right there. And you can add whatever you want that's saved on your laptop, whether it's the pre-approval or anything like that that you want to keep in ZipForms. But it's just as easy to send it from a regular email. It's just preference, whatever you want to do.
Correct.
But you could do it. You can do either way. Good.
Okay. So we have covered how to set up your ZipForms transaction. If you have not yet done so, please remember that if you have already set up a ZipForms transaction for this buyer, don't start a new one to do the contracts. Just open up the one you're already using. The contract should be in there for you to fill out. What we see a lot on the back end is agents that every time they need a document signed for their buyer, they're starting a new ZipForms transaction. That gets crazy bananas, both for you and for the OA when they're trying to go into your ZipForms and pull out a document that you need or that needs to get into DTR. So once you have a transaction started for that buyer, you stay in that transaction. That applies to multiple offers. So I want to touch on that. At this point, as we know, market is crazy and your buyer is not necessarily going to get their first offer accepted. So chances are you might be repeating this process several times on their behalf, making multiple offers. The beauty of having this done in zip forms is that it will still keep a record of any offer that you've made because they've signed it and it's come back as a signed PDF version. So if that doesn't go through and you now have to make another offer, you're going to go back into that same zip forms transaction and reopen the blue version, which is the editable version of that same contract, and just change out the information that needs to be changed, such as the address, obviously, if it's a different sales price that you're offering. But generally, most of the terms that your buyer wants are going to stay the same, right? Seller concession is pretty much going to stay the same, closing date, like all that stuff, it might stay the same. So rather than doing a whole new contract from scratch, you can reuse that same blue editable version of the contract in zip forms and just change the specific information that might need to be changed. You might not need some of the same addendums. If one was lead-based paint and one isn't, you can uncheck that box, but just make the few edits you need to make. Again, send it for save your changes, and then send it for signature. So every time they're signing one of these as a proposal to purchase, even though it's a contract, when you're using it as a purchase offer, once they've signed it, it's saving that. So you will still have a record of all the proposals you have made on behalf of this buyer. So don't be scared to just edit that contract as many times as you might need to. Okay. So we covered how to do it. We covered how to fill in the contract, MLS Connect, right? And Records Connect, which will fill in the property info and seller info for you. Fast fill if you choose to use that, although you do not have to. Make sure you add any appropriate addendum. And keep in mind, it adds them to your transaction, but it does not like physically attach them to the contract. So you have to, when you send it for signatures, check them all off to send them all out as part of the envelope. Then they'll all be together in a folder. What else?
It looks like Randy has a question.
Do you have a question? Shoot. Unmute yourself if you need to. I can't hear you.
Oh, is that
There you
better?
are.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, I do have a question. Every once in a while, the public record shows one name on there. Often if it's an LLC or like a divorce, something, change names real quick. But the seller is really a different party that is in some way not connected to that. So if we automatically make out a contract the way we're seeing it in public records, it's up to the selling agent to then correct all that in the form of an addendum and make sure that that is correct, because we wouldn't necessarily know that.
Yeah, it would be up to the listing agent to make those corrections. And again, this is going to be for us doing offers. Normally, the contracts are done. You have that information. You can even check with the listing agent if you're going to say, I'm going to make the contract, you can double check with the listing agent, but that gets crossed out. So we're the only area that has not done it before, as you know, just as a way of doing business. North Jersey and South Jersey, they do it all the time. They take those contracts and cross them out, and they're so marked up, sometimes you can't even read it, but that's what they use. So they make corrections on it all the time. So if we're using a seller that we're getting from public records and it's not the correct one, they will make that change, you know, obviously before they do anything, but more than likely they'll get revised back and forth because of terms or whatever that you have on there. So it'll be corrected, but basically we want to just make sure that everybody's familiar with how to do it. So if it changes all of a sudden and they pull that form out again and they won't let us bring it back, that proposal to purchase, you're not going to be like running crazy, like, you know, what am I going to do? The OAs just cannot handle the amount to do contracts for every offer that you put in. It just doesn't make sense to do it.
And is this work the same for South Jersey for the autofill?
For Paragon, South Jersey, but I don't know if it's correct. It won't pick it up. I honestly don't think.
So just manually enter it?
Yeah.
Because it's not your main MLS. So for
Okay.
for our offices down the shore, yes, they have that same thing. For us, it's attached to Bright.
So
it's
here's what I'll say to that. If you are an agent who you yourself is a member of multiple MLSs, right? So if you have your own private account with Paragon or South Jersey, whatever MLS, you can enter that information in your Zip Forms, all your profiles, right? Your ACE profile, your Zip Forms profile. You just have to put like your member ID in there. So if you are a member of multiple MLSs and you have entered that information into your Zip Forms profile, when you use that MLS or Record Connect button, one of the things that popped up was a drop down of what MLS it's pulling from. The default for us is set to Bright. However, if you add a second MLS to your profile, you can use that drop down to then change it to whatever it might be. And then hopefully that button would work the same way. I personally have never tried it because I'm not a member of multiple MLSs, so I'm not sure how exactly if that would work beautifully or not, but it is set up so that you could do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
I hear you. I love your
Can you hear me?
background. Did you make
Okay.
that?
Oh, you see this? You see this? You
It's
see, I had to
great.
give you something new. This is something new. You know what I mean?
Did you make
So-
it, or did you made it yourself?
Yeah. I actually made this myself. I got this fancy new camera that I'm using, the Logitech, whatever they call this, a Brio. So I'm playing with it now just to see what this stuff will look like. You know
Yeah,
what
it
I
looks
mean?
great. It looks
Watching
good.
Videos. Yeah,
Looks good.
thanks. When it comes to the proposal to purchase, if we do lose it, it will hurt us a little bit because of the speed right now that people are putting in offers to type up a whole contract. Sometimes you don't have that kind of time.
Oh,
Right.
I know, 100%. And that's why when it came out of, it automatically came out of our library. And then it took me a day or so to be screaming and yelling to get
Right.
it back in.
Right.
But
Especially now. Like about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, didn't matter. We could
it didn't matter.
put together a contract. It could take us an hour or two, no big deal. But right now,
Well, I
Crazy.
know, and we know that, and that's why, we got it back in there, but it's
Right.
really not up to us. So the attorney for, NAR and also for New Jersey has been trying to go directly to contract for all of New Jersey for at least 3 years. So probably even longer. I mean, I'm
Right.
doing 21 years. I think they've been talking about it for 21 years. But
that's
we were
crazy.
told 3 years ago that they were going to do it, still has not done it. But the problem is, if they say we're only going to go to contract, there may be some offices that are still going to accept the proposal.
Well, if you notice on the MLS right now, you have some that actually say to you,
Say it.
send only proposal to purchases. Because
Correct.
they don't want to read through a whole contract to find out. So what I've been doing, when I send an agent an offer now, I've been putting the highlights in the email. So the price, the terms, the amount we want in concession, everything in the email. So even if I had to give them a contract, they don't have to read through a whole contract.
Correct.
You
So
can also send both. If you want to get in the habit of doing straight to contract, which I have done many times because I want to be familiar with it, right? Send both. Send the proposal because it highlights, like you said, everything right there, and a lot of agents prefer that. But do the contracts too, and or ask the agent first which one they prefer. But the whole point is, we all agree with you, Teron. We all would rather stick with the proposal. I don't know an agent out there that wants to do this straight to contract thing. However, we should be prepared for that eventuality.
In case it
So-
changes.
Right. So the more you can start doing contracts on your own, and that's why I suggested, even if you have a seller, instead of asking Patty to do it, try doing it on your own. You can always have Lisa or her double check you at the beginning, but I do all my own contracts for sellers and buyers. So that I've gotten in the habit of it. And what I can say for me personally is I'm to the point now where it does not take me any longer to do a full contract than it would the proposal to purchase. They take me an equal amount of time at this point because I've gotten used to it. So I know we're not all there, but start practicing now since this is most likely going to happen. And that way, by the time we get there, you can, move a lot faster if you need to, going straight to
I
contract.
like the fast fill. You know what? I do my own contracts. Lisa knows that. Everybody knows that. But the fast fill, I never use that. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because I will use that now.
Yeah, it basically makes it look almost like the proposal to purchase form.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
So that MLS Connect, Record Connect, and Fast Fill are going to be your best friends once you know that contract really well.
Yes.
Good.
Yep. Awesome job, Corey. Awesome.
Great job.
Other?
Yep.
Absolutely. Anybody have any questions if you want to unmute? Corey covered everything, and again, it's going to be recorded. I think it was a great class, Corey. I mean, everything that you could even think to ask. We have some new agents on the class right now. So if you're not sure of Zip Forms, if you're not sure of DocuSign, we offer classes on those. I don't know if they're in your YouTube library yet, Corey, but
there is one. Yep, there's the Zip Forms DTR combo class, which takes you through the basics of starting the transaction in Zip Forms and then taking it all the way into DTR. So that one is on my YouTube channel, which I sent the link out to, and I'm sure we'll do some more in-depth, specifically Zip Forms, showing you all the neat little tips and tricks of Zip Forms. I'm sure that will be coming up again.
Yeah. And DocuSign is amazing, and we also have like the tutorial, the videos online as well in the training library. That's like your best friend. You're going to use that all the time. So that's another great tool.
Corey,
Awesome.
you said that you're recording this, okay? Are all the comments from like Lisa had interjected a few things that I thought were really important. Will they be on there too?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm automatically deleted when I say something.
No, you're not. Thank you.
Yeah, all of the audio and video will be recorded. So yes, it'll all be in there. And this takes a while it's a process after we finish, but once it is, I will send it out in an email to everyone with the link to the specific video, but I will also be adding it to the YouTube channel. And again, it takes a little while to process there, but that way you can use either link and access it at any time if you want to rewatch it.
It was a good class, Corey. Thank you.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Very good. Thank you.
It works because you guys show up. So that's the beauty of it. All right. Anything else you guys want to ask myself or Lisa before we sign off here?
Oh, and after all the old, proposals and whether they go to contract or not, when that's all done and over with, should we be deleting these out of DTR, or how do we delete them out if they doesn't become a closed transaction?
Don't delete them out.
Don't delete them out. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're not really doing a DTR room until you are like under contract, you know what I mean? For a buyer, anyway, for a
So it
seller.
can stay in Zip Forms. It can stay
Keep
in
them
there
in Zip
forever.
Forms.
Just
Yeah,
leave them in
because
Zip Forms.
technically,
Okay.
we're supposed to have a record of any offer we write on
Everything.
behalf of that
Okay.
buyer. So yeah, that's why I mentioned the PDF version of any signed offer, as long as they have signed it, will still be in there. If you are doing something where you're printing them out and sitting with your buyer to go through them and having them wet signed, then you want to keep a copy of that in a physical file, or you want to scan it in and have a record of that. Not necessarily in DTR, although you can, because it can be at the bottom hanging out, and the one that actually makes it to contract is the one you would put in the task list part, right? But
Right.
I frequently do upload other offers I've made on behalf of that buyer and just have them in there
Right.
because we are supposed to have a record somewhere.
Okay.
Right?
I know
Okay.
Zip Forms removes them after a certain amount of time. I think it might be a year or
Well,
something.
it'll archive them. It won't.
Yeah, to
remove
archive them. So they'll
okay.
knock out automatically, pretty
They'll
much.
still be under, if you go into that, like that transaction never goes away unless you
Mhm.
delete it completely. So the transaction will always be there. Maybe after a certain amount of time, it gets rid of it, but doesn't get rid of it. It just puts it in an archive
Okay.
folder, which will show up in that transaction. So you can still go into the Zip Forms transaction, open it up, and then under folders, it looks like an old school like file box we all used to carry around.
Right. Yeah.
And it'll say archive, and you can go and
Yeah.
this will be in there. Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, it's nice to see everybody, the ones that I saw. Thank you, Corey, very much. It was
Thank you,
great.
Corey.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Coming,
Great.
and I'll again email everybody, today or tomorrow whenever the video finishes processing. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.